Good evening, everyone. Here we have Mark's beautiful RG550 in, I don't know what the colour's called, but isn't that pretty? So, ta-da. Okay. I mean, you know, it's an Ibanez, okay? You know, all that kind of great, big, deep, sharp-looking, super strat, curvy werves kind of thing going on. I mean, personally, I like a bit more roundiness, but these are fantastic nonetheless. Look at that design. Got a nice big belly carve, very precise, very sharp around the edges. Nice forearm slope. Floyd Rose, volume and tone, nothing complicated. 5-way switch, and we've got the INF pickups. Maple neck, but made in 3-ply pieces. 3 pieces. I've got my tremolo sticking in the way, but yeah, look at that. Now, great thing about a neck like that with the middle bit, extra middle bit, 3-piece. It's great for cancelling out warp, twist, bend, you name it. So find it's hello there, a fantastic piece of kit. And oh look, the only downside on this whole thing, what is that? For real? Is that a blemish in the wood or a piece of marker pen gone? Ah, it's the weirdest thing. Man, I don't even know what that is. I'll take a closer look at that in a minute. Anyway, so Mark brought this to me, and he's had it looked at by someone else, and I'm going to be very polite about this because I respect everybody who fixes guitars or sets guitars up, even if they have more or less experience than me, and many have more experience and some have less. And sometimes when you have a certain amount of experience, you're in a privileged position of being able to kind of spot if and when somebody has not got to grips with this guitar and its so-called complexities, okay? Because you know, the first thing to say is, we know truss rods are daunting, okay? I did a video about that last night, but it's all about how many people, and Mark is a great example. He told me today that, you know, in 50 years playing, he never felt comfortable adjusting the truss rod, and I totally understand it. I probably didn't for the first 35 years of playing. And so there's this kind of thing that we all seem, or many of us seem to inherit, this kind of fear of adjusting the truss rod, but we also, I think many of us inherit fears of the tremolo systems, various different tremolo systems, and they seem really, really complicated and defying our understanding. And I think what is true about any guitar, as I found over the last 8 years of doing this work, is a guitar is complicated only because there are a number of variables all at play at once. Excuse me, just bit my tongue. All at play at once. And in fact, the variable list, if you go into details of variables, so if you think about the gross variables in the action, you've got the height of the first fret action, i.e. where the nut is set to and how deep the slots are cut. You've got where the bridge saddle height is set, whether it's high or low. You've got the amount of curvature or not in the neck, whether it's curved, relieved or flat. You've got how hard a player hits the strings. You've got what other things have you got? You have got, yeah, I mean, those are the basic ones. And then on top of that, you've got the kind of floating tremolo thrown into the mix, which requires a bit of setup. Then you've got locking tuners, and you've got strings that go on here that can be different qualities, and also strings bring with them a set of slack built into the strings that have to be removed. And on top of all of that, you've got frets that are varying degrees of even or uneven into the whole mix. So there are a lot of things that can change, and they're all to some degree interrelated. And I think that's why it gets really scary for a lot of people, certainly when you kind of look at a tremolo like the Floyd Rose, or even Floyd Rose, where's that? Rhode Island. Or even a 6-screw Strat style tremolo. It just feels, it can feel too much going on at once. Now, So I can tell from this guitar that the person who's looked at it hasn't got to grips with it, and it's probably outside of their comfort zone. As I have to admit, it is for many people who set up guitars. They kind of hope they get it right on a Floyd Rose and sort of run a mile. Now, years back, a couple of years back, I've made a point of figuring out what happens with, for example, I started with the 6-screw tremolo, and I kind of worked out, thanks particularly to an Italian luthier called Galeazzo Fredua. I'm going to put his name on here because he's a really great musician and luthier. If you look him up, he does a lot of Beatles song, harmony, vocals. No, that's not right. Frood. Galeazzo, as you'd imagine, like an ice cream. Italian, there, Fredua. And well worth looking up on YouTube. And he had a great video showing how to set up 6-screw tremolos with a simple system, using a relatively pretty simple system, using post-it notes to set the range of float that you might want in a tremolo. And it's that sort of thing, is with all the other variables going on, how do you determine how much float? Because this thing is balanced against some springs, isn't it? And how do you get them to work out? Blah, 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 and it gets frightening. So Mark brought this to me, and the first thing he said to me is he's had it looked at twice by a local guy, and both times it wasn't right, and it came back kind of worse than it went in. And in some ways, one of the worst things about it when it came back is that it wouldn't stay in tune. So my job is to set it up for him, and the first thing I set out to do was to figure out why it wouldn't stay in tune. Now, I did that off camera actually, because I was listening to something on the radio. But the simple thing I will say now, Mark, to solve your mystery, that was loose for a start, and the other ones probably were as well, but this one was finger, you could undo it with your fingers, it was rattling. So the first thing about that is that if you have that, if you're working the tremolo and that is unlocked, one of these are unlocked, it'll allow unevenness to creep in, and it won't ever seem to stay in tune. The other thing, so obviously what I did was I locked that off, but I didn't lock it off until I had set the tremolo the way I wanted. Now, the question is, people think it's really, really complicated. How do you set a Floyd Rose? Okay, and it's actually really easy. What you do, I suppose I better do it, hadn't I? Let's do it as if we had got a guitar in the state I had it a minute ago. So let's undo the locking nuts, right? There we go, they're undone. But let us go to the back, and as you're suggested you do when you want to set up the tremolo on your guitar, go first to the back and screw in your claw. There you can see me. I would say further than you think it needs. Now, let's see, is this the right way around? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, let's do something first. Let us take a wedge. I have a wooden and plastic wedge, and what we want to do is we want to put it under the back here, and it sort of sits. You can get it to sit on the ledge here, and what we want to do with this is we want to put it in there so that normally on many older Floyd Roses, it's so the plate is parallel to the top of the guitar, but in this case there's a bit of a wedge shape, as I thought when I saw it earlier on. I'm not very familiar with these, but what we want to do is we want to put this in so that these barrels that you do the tightening of the blocks there, and we get them perpendicular, parallel is the right word, perpendicular is the way. We get them parallel to the body wherever they seat. So I've used this little wedge of wood. Then what I do, which you can't see unless I spin you around cleverly, like so. Then what you do is you take your screwdriver and you screw this all the way in, let's say. Now this guitar, it's got 3 springs. If I had 4 springs, you wouldn't have to be so far in, but let's put it all the way in for the purpose of this. It doesn't matter, it's better to be much over, so I'm going to go right to the wall. So now we've got a ton of pull on there that would overpower the strings, but we've also got this thing on here which is holding it nicely parallel still. Now, what you do, that's easy, isn't it? Set your neck up parallel with this little wooden wedge. Sorry, your bridge plate parallel with a little wooden wedge. And then screw in your claw screws. Now what we want to do is we want to get, where do we go? We want to get, oh yes, get yourself a tuner. So this is really simple. Take away all of the panic and fears. Put that in there. Get your electronic tuner input. And what you do is you've got remember you've got these loose. You want to go to this end now and you want to unscrew these all the way out first, and then turn them in. Two of these, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so that places them about 2 turns in from their highest, so they can go both ways. They can slack off or they can tighten up, but more tightening than slacking. So we've got, the next thing we want to do is check the neck relief with the guitar as is. It's pretty flat, I like that. And now we're ready to set our bridge floating. You can do it without checking the neck relief, but I just did it because I want it to be, I want to not have to adjust it after that, but I might have to do it later anyway because I'm going to change strings. So what we do is we plug it in, open the volume up, and then we tune to E, standard tuning, A, do it really quick and then fine tune it. So if I go back to E, slightly down again, what I should have said, in fact I should have said, before you do that, before you lock anything down or even float the thing, look, we're still held in place, go back one step, get hold of your strings, and what's going to happen is this is going to slip, so we'll reset it. But right now, get hold of your strings and stretch, do the thing that I always do in my videos later in the video, which is to stretch out all the slack you've got in your strings. And you need to do this. One of the things I think you'll feel a lot less freaked out doing a Floyd Rose if you've stretched all the slack out of your strings first, because the slack in your strings is just one variable you don't need at this point in time. Obviously it will eventually settle down, but you just want to I'm going to give it a good couple of goes. I've done some stretching already on this, but so do it until there's no more slack you can get out of the strings. You tune it up again. The problem is with pulling at the moment, I'm yanking this little wedge of wood out of place each time because I'm putting quite a lot of force into the string stretching. So to tune it, you'd want to place this back. So here we go back again. I'm going to now relieve this a little bit and settle for parallel again. Now I'm going to assume I've tuned it out, stretched it out lots. So I'm going to go, see, up to E. Now you see how I've stretched all of that tuning out. Now that would be getting in the way of you achieving a nice setup on the Floyd Rose. So it's much better to get it sorted first. So we're nearly there. So the idea now, with this block holding it level, to get as close as you can to tune as possible. Now we still don't lock anything down, but what we do now is we get the tremolo arm and just push it in enough to release this. Now what's going to happen? Yes, because the bridge was being held by the block, now it's not being held, so what it will do is the tightened springs now will pull this back and it will be suddenly very sharp. Take the arm out, don't panic, very sharp. Now here's the secret. You get hold of, I don't know what you can see here, I'm just trying to do all this one-handed. You get hold of the tuner again, still there. Remember what we tuned up to? E. Can you see? Let's have a look and see if you can see. Well, not very well there. Something like that. Right, that's not the best view. Amos, so sorry. I'll try and get you in. So there's my vision. Unfortunately, there's no backlighting on this. So E is now F sharp. See that? Now what you do, all you do now, is just gently, slowly dial out a few turns each side. Dial out the claw screws. We were F sharp, remember? Now we're going down away from F sharp. And you unscrew a few turns, and as you get closer to E on this low E, see we're on F now. We've got one tone to go, couple of turns, way down below F. We're going to be in the sharp of E territory now, which is good. Now you see this? This is the beauty of it. Oops, come on. It's hard doing this with one hand. See how I'm tuning this note back to E just by using the tremolo claw screws. Now, how about that? I don't know how well you can see it, but alright. So now we're on E. Put it over like this. And what's happened? Well, it's risen back up so that those bars, the rods there, you know, the tuning, the locking things, they're now back parallel. But remember when we took the block out, they went down. Now I've released them back to the E note. We're back where we should be. Now we can lock off these tuner locking things down here. Locking nut. Ready? One. Nice and tight. That wasn't what happened before. Sometimes on cheaper guitars, and actually occasionally I found on an Ibanez, you can get, sometimes from the factory, you can get a machine bolt here. This little thing, I've seen them, I found them, maybe it's somebody who replaced them badly. If these are a millimetre or half a mil too long, they hit the base under here and they stop the lock going on properly, and you actually find it feels like it's solidly on, but these are loose, and that will allow your strings to move. So that's another thing to watch out for. So we've had quite an easy time of it. We've gone and miraculously got this almost perfectly in tune, but we don't trust it. It won't be perfectly in tune. So what we do now, as you can imagine, is I'm holding this up so I don't crush the jack socket. Look, that's slightly flat. So I dial it to pitch with my fine tuner. That's saying E, it's not an E. B. It's on G. That's D. A. Sharp of E. Slacken it off. That is it. That is your Floyd Rose. Now, there is one thing that remain, or two things that remain for us to check. Having set it up in this configuration, what we know is we've got the bridge sitting level as we want, and the reason we wanted it level, and not just higgledy-piggledy, is because we want some predictable backwards pitch increase, and we want, obviously, unlimited downwards. Now, we got. Now on the high strings we're very, very slightly flat, and what we're going to do is it still could be slack in the strings. So I'm going to tune them up. Now if it doesn't sort itself out, then we've got another problem that I don't know about, and I would then interrogate these locking nuts. Now here's a way of telling if it's slipping or there's slack, right, without using the tremolo for a minute. Let's go to tune it to E. Okay, so take it and pull it. If it goes slack, flat, then it's either releasing slack or it's pulling through this locking nut. I'm going to think it's close, and I'll consider that it's still got that tiny bit of slack. But even the tiniest bit of slack will make this difference now. So this is why it's so important, and I didn't do it enough really, but well, I will do on the next set of strings. It's so important to eradicate all of that slack. So as you can see, I'm doing extra pulling. Even if it makes it flat, we can always undo it and tune it out again, because we're broadly in the right area here. Yeah, that's slack. So this is why you'll never get on with a Floyd Rose if you don't fully stretch your strings out exhaustively. And what's the point having it if you can't depend on it? See how flat that is. Now, if you're sharp-eyed, you'll know this could be either string slippage through either this locking block or these end nuts. So we'll not worry about this tuning stability for a minute, because I wanted to show you the basic setup, which is there. The other thing we haven't come to, and we'll have a look once I've stretched the new strings out fully before we do any locking down. I will we'll come back to that. But for the first thing, I wanted you to see how simple it was to get this with the setup with the bridge in line. What I'm going to do, by the way, is I'm just going to double tighten these, because I want to make sure nothing's slipping at this end. Now, one of course the mysteries of the Floyd Rose that nobody ever tells you about is how tight is too tight and how tight isn't too tight. And you don't have a torque wrench built into here, so you're just going to have to guess it. It's quite tight on those. They are a physical crushing force, not the best system in the world, locking down your strings on these little metal blocks. And these little metal blocks aren't even straight. Some of them are pushed sideways, so we'll look at that when we come to change the strings. Okay, so, but the principle is we've got it in the right position. Okay, it looks wedge shaped because it is a wedge shaped bridge, but these little tuner the locking rods are parallel to the body, and so that gives us plenty of downward movement and upward. So the next question we've got is what's happening with the playing action. We know from the beginning that we had enough, tiny bit of relief in the neck. That's enough for me. My concern now is what's happening with the first and the last fret. Well, if I start with a bigger variable, which is the last fret, I can tell you right now this is coming in at close to, it's actually on 2 millimeters, which is too high. So 2 on the bass side and 1.75 on the treble side. That's too tall. So the instructions tell you, you adjust that by dialing down this. Now interestingly, the instructions do not say anything about slacking the strings off because you will damage the knife edges that people get terribly frightened about. And of course it's a bit of a problematic thing, because if I slack this off now, everything goes haywire. So I'm going to do this, and I know I will get flack for this because people really don't like how this looks. But there is no what am I doing? I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? So I want to take this down. Now, the slight problem we've got, and I did mention this to Mark earlier on, is it may well be that with everything set up on this guitar, we have no more downward movement, which we no longer have. And so our lowest possible playing action here at the moment is practically, let's have a look, I need to get my new glasses soon. This is now, yeah, it's still 2, so that's too high. And while it's that high, we expect to find it a little bit too high at this end, the what's it end, first fret end. Oh, sorry, the picture's been terrible. Just basically almost bang on the 0.3 I like. Now, so what do we do, right? We've got a problem. We've got can't get any lower action with this bridge. The saddles are not the kind that you can raise up or down, so we have no alternative on this setup other than to shim the neck. Now that will, I'm sure, bother some people, but there is no further downward action you can have. You could, theoretically, you could fake the action by pulling back like this and losing any floating backward pitch, right? Because it does lower it down, but the problem is you'd lose all your backward run. Now it is possible that we could I don't know what the word is. I'm not going to say bodge this. What I mean is I prefer to have the flat positioning here, but you don't necessarily need all of that. So we could get away. Let's have a look. Now this is a little bit out non-standard, so I'm going to have a little bit of a fiddle around the back here for a second. So just please ignore me. What I'm trying to do is I'm just get a few little blocks, and I'm just going to see if I can, when I fix it into a certain position, whether it gives me, first of all, the action I want. So that's not far down yet. Let's put another one on. Let's do 2 of those and 1 of those as our sample. So this is a little bit of trial and error. No, that's not tall enough. 2 of those, 1 of those. Okay, where are we pushing at now? So we've got that from there, and that's a tiny bit more. Bit too much, but let's imagine we aimed for that. Then we have, we've got the action we want, so that's possible, but it means we lose a bit of what I would have called my preferred range of operation. Now, in a way, this is a detail that kind of I would have hoped we wouldn't have hit on, because it just sort of makes things look a little bit more complicated. So that's not enough there. So let's go 2 of those and 1 of those. This is my little kit of blocks of wood coming into play here. What have we got here? Now we've got a backward push, and we've got that's 1.5 exactly. Again, that's a fraction too high, but we can cheat it. The problem with this is I'm going to have to find the balance, the pointing point to where to measure this. It's like a line I'm going to need to guide myself with, or actually I can block these out probably the same. Block them that side and that side. Right, we're now pointing, don't mind the dust, we're fractionally proud of there, and we do have our 1mm there. So that is doable. Now the question is how much we've got left after that. So what I can now do, let's go back to the beginning. So this is a step you hopefully wouldn't really be doing, but you never know. So I'm going to slack these off again. We're going to redo everything and anything. We'll leave the bridge right down on its stops. And what I'll do now is I will tighten up these. Now what will probably happen here now is that the pieces of wood will fall out, which was going to make my attempt at things not work. So what I'll do is I'll pull this the other way. I'm going to put this in here. Now, actually I don't. Right, let's do something. Let's do it all the way in. We may still have to make another adjustment. So yeah, unfortunately this has just become a little bit more complicated, but the thing I'm putting right now is a constraint or limitation imposed by the guitar. Okay, so with the thing, with the we don't really have enough springs or movement in here now, but we've only got, how many holes have we got in here? We've got potential for 5. So what I'm trying to do is get away without needing to shim the neck, because it's better not to. So at the moment this isn't pulling far enough, hard enough. So what we can do is we can take off this little cap here. Better get one of these. So the nice thing is that the Ibanez has a little locking device, and these are hooked in. They shouldn't come flying off. It's just a securing device. There we go. Oh, drops one of those in there. Okay, so we've only got the 3. Ah, that's interesting. We've only got 3 to work with, so we can't add an extra. What's it? There are extra holes, but they're screw threaded holes for this, so that's not going to work. Nope. So the only thing, what can I think of? That's longer, shorter. We are in an interesting conundrum. We want it to start back down from there. So I want to tune it. Let's see if we can do it. Sorry, this is a pain really, because it was all going to be dead simple, but this is a separate problem to the standard situation. Come back here. So what I'm just trying to find a way of doing is to hold this in the position I want, and it's down that way, down there, so I want a bit of extra. And that's just under the line. Okay, let's work with that. Let's call that the aim. Right. So we're fully in as far as we can go there, and what I want to do now is to tune this. I think I'll put this little cap back on, because it isn't going to do me any good since I can't alter it. Yeah, we've got no more spring, so it's got to work with the 3 given springs, and the only thing we could do is find some shorter springs that would possibly do the trick. Okay, so let's have a look at that. That's quite a lot further down. Nice low action. Let's double check. Yeah, okay, we can work with that. So we're going to aim for this. So, as before, we are loose at that end. We're going to go all the way out again with these. We've acknowledged that we either have to shim the neck to get the low action we want, or we have to reduce some of the backward travel we've got available to us. So we've done that. It's really, in terms of pitch increase, it's less common that we do dive bombs going backwards. So back to the tuner. what am I going to do? Oh yes, I'm going to tune it to pitch. Ah, there go my blocks. So they've fallen out. When am I going to be able to work this? Now that's sunk all the way in, that's okay. So what we'll do is we'll get this now and just lift this. The problem is with this one is I can't get the thing to hold it where we want it. So I'd have to go in with a little push from, that's too tall. I need a little bit that fits in there, which isn't this. A little strip of wood. Hold on. Let's see if I can slice one of these down. A very small bit of wood. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we don't have the ease of holding it in place that way, so I'm going to have to do it this way. That's too high, so it has to be thinner than that. Now, how does it? Show me what we're looking at. No, tighter. No, bigger, bigger, no. Two of these bits. Any chance of two of them working? No. So I'm trying to get it to a certain position, and this wedge would probably be good, but I have to cut the wedge down in size as well. That's doable. Usable. Right, now I want them to about there. Yabba dabba do. Close. Yeah, that's as good as I can get my wedge to work at the moment. So with that wedged in place, basically we get to do the tune it to pitch again. Okay, so that's where we're at. Next thing I do is lock off the locking tuners. I'll do them lightly first and then a bit of a push. Locked. Now what we do is we remove, oh, I did that thing, oh dear, my glue's come apart. How weird. Oh well, that's off. Now what we'll do is we will undo these again. Sorry, making it complicated. remember what we do is once we've taken that out, we tune it to E by releasing the whatsits. And these will slowly bring up the locking bolts, which we know won't come parallel now with the body guitar top. What they'll do is they'll sit a little bit under like that. So I should be hearing, we're almost down on E as before, heading towards E. So on top of the normal setup, the floating of the Floyd Rose, I've had to make an alteration to its range because we didn't have enough adjustment left in the bridge. Okay, so now we're at pitch, correct pitch, but I will actually, I can probably just physically do it with the manual tuners. Now, the difference in tuning is because I'm leaning it on its back at the moment. Let's see if we can. Okay, lock them off, and then any fine tuning now, which you sometimes get because the locking tuners sometimes press the strings in a bit because they have to clamp them, and then you can tune that off finally with micro tuners. Okay, so now we're pointing a bit further down than we were before, but that allows us to have a start action of just over 1 millimeter if we want it, and that is what we want. So that's the game, and it's complicated there a little bit by running into more than one problem at once, but you could see how I got around that. Now the pitch up, yep, that's a standard 6-screw Strat range, even still we've got left in here, which is fine. Half a tone on the high E, tone on the B, and a tone and a half on the G. Now running that like that is almost taking it so flat that nearly touches out somewhere. That's nearly at its, well, that's at its limit with height, and I think we'd probably be better off taking a very small backward adjustment on both posts. We can do it to very small amounts. We are at, my eyes, 1.4-ish. I think that's safe limit. Of course, all tremolos that are floating change notes when you bend, if you've got a drone note going. Okay, so I'm happy so far that we've got an action that we want. We've got a, what do you call it? We've got the action we want down here without shimming the neck. We've got an adequate range of backward pitch up. We've got the full range of pitch down, and it's staying in tune, partly because a combination of having stretched fully the strings and also having made sure that these things were tight, as well as the locking blocks at the other end. So I'm happy with that right now, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guitar home now. And it's not something I do often, but I'm going to take this home and I'm going to play it to see if it needs any fretwork at all. I've got a sneaky feeling it might not, which would be great. It'll certainly be great from Mark's point of view, but you know, the important bit in all of this is figuring out the problems that we had in the basic setup and putting them right. And of course, if you can't get them right or sorted out, then the guitar's you know, a horrible thing to play, and you don't want to play it. So let's just find out. I think I also had, I don't need these. I'll put these off to one side because I will bring this back up. Will I bring it back? No, I better put them back on. Strike that, reverse it, because this may be the last we see of it, assuming, of course, that it plays absolutely perfectly and doesn't need any fretwork. I wonder what that is. I have a horrible feeling that that mark is a sort of burn, a saw burn or something under the finish. I don't suspect it's going to come out. Right, let's put the covers on. There's its little adjuster for the hex, for the truss rod. Hex key, truss rod. Upside down. Yeah, so this guitar, like all others, is subject to periodic change in environment, you know, and of course, if and when that happens, the neck can change shape. It's probably less likely to on this nice Ibanez because of the quality of the build and the fact that the neck is 3-part laminate. But Mark, I encourage you to look at my video of yesterday, the one called Learning to Love, no, what was it called? Love Your Truss Rod or something like that. Anyway, very recent one. It'll tell you or reiterate everything I said about, I told you today about the truss rod, but you really need to be confident in making adjustments to it. Now the good thing about that is that while we're set up the way we want to be set up, you can make adjustments to the truss rod without any fear, and of course because it won't change anything else important. Oh, of course what we would need to do is, if we find it plays well, we'd want to change and put the new strings on because they're a different gauge. So I will take those home with me. But let's say we wanted to make an adjustment. I'm and we discovered, or we felt, that the relief shape on this was too flat. There was not enough gap, and actually it is enough. But with this guitar, like any other, we remove the little adjuster cover, like so. Some of them have little slidey covers that you don't have to undo, which is very neat and nifty. You just push them, the little door pushes to one side. But in this case, you can just remove the cover and gently hoik it out of the way. And then we expose the little truss rod. Now this is a different one in construction slightly to the one in the video I mentioned. But if you look at it, it's like a Gibson style one, and so you have a socket that fits over the top of that. Now, the beauty of that, he said, walking into things, the beauty of that is we can adjust it in very much the same way. I was hoping we wouldn't have to take off this. We might just be able to fit that through, comme ça. It's a bit of a... There's not a lot of room to get it attached to it there anyway. In many ways you'd be better off with this off, which we can do here because it's not attached to anything. This is just holding the strings down a bit. Let's get the correct thingy. Once you've locked this off, this string tree thing really is irrelevant. It's not doing anything useful. I'm not quite sure why people, Ibanez insists on having it. It's only really any value if you were playing this guitar without the locking nuts on, and maybe it assumes some people will. That's going to play perfectly well without that bar tensioning, over tensioning the strings. Okay, so let's just, for you, Mark, a lifelong truss rodophobe, we've just done all that lovely setup, so now I'm going to mess it up completely by fitting on the little thing, which is not a very good fit, but we try and get it on as far as we can. Let's pretend, well, now let's see what happens if we tighten the adjuster. Let's do a bit more. Oh, Sam, you've ruined all that lovely setup you achieved. Now, this is actually, excuse my going out of view for a minute. This really doesn't want to fit on here very well. There we are. It's quite a tough access. There's not a lot of room, but I've just gone and cranked it and put quite a bit of straightening into it. And now when I come and check it, there's no relief at all. That neck is dead flat. And what will we notice from that neck being dead flat? Well, at the moment, nothing. Well, maybe we will. Let's listen with my special furry ear. Oh, now, I'm just thinking now, we will probably need to do levelling, and the reason why is that Mark reported loads of fret slap, and of course I didn't bring my notes up with me. I thought I remembered them all. Anyway, I still think, well, I will go and play it at home, see what's needed. Now, notice what happened when I tightened the truss rod. Not only did the neck flatten out, so there's no gap at all now when I measure it by holding down the first and the last fret of the same string, the low E, and I look for a gap at the middle point, and there is no gap between the string and the fret. And that means the neck has gone from being curved to flat. That can be some people really like the neck very flat, and you can hear it's sort of playing, but as soon as you go beyond dead flat, you start to choke off these notes down here by the nut, and you can hear it struggling now. And that's because we're on the verge, or have possibly just gone slightly over into backbowed. So that's not what we want. That's why if Mark, you remember me talking about the neck having kind of in the frets, there tends to be little clusters of hills and valleys. having some room in the neck, some relief curve, is vital to give the strings space to move at all. This is, I would say right now it's dead flat. It's not quite going into the backbone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to gently fit my thingy on, and I'm going to go backwards. Of course, the problem with this is that as you go backwards, you don't have a lot of wiggle room to get the blasted thing off again. It's very difficult. So you have to, and then you don't have a lot of wiggle room to reconnect it. So I've just managed to get a couple of quick turns into it. And now we'll find, if we listen again with this, we'll find gone. And we're nearly back in tune. So that's sort of back where we were without any real worry. It's actually fractionally flatter than we had it before. We still have a little tiny bit of, oh, not tiny bit, we have some fret slap there, which is what Mark was hoping to lose. And he had it on the higher action as well, and now we've got it on a lower action. It's still there. But actually, as a result of some of the other adjustments we've made, it isn't as bad as it was. Okay, so I'm still going to take it home and play it. I'm going to look at the action again. Again, of course, you can make it disappear by bending the neck quite easily, but we're doing it standing up like this. You can hear it touching. It's probably less than 1/10 of a mil. If a neck can stand it, it'll be the Ibanez that can. Now, all of this will need to change slightly tomorrow, because as I take these 10s off and put on 9 to 42s, the neck will behave differently, so we will need to crank the what's it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these little extra bits up here that I don't need, because I can just play this thing tonight and get my feel of how well the frets are going to perform with a little bit of leveling to eradicate that slap, as I call it. I think I'll just keep this with it. I'm going to take it back so that I can So I hope you kind of could see from that, even though we took a little bit of a roundabout because of the compounding issues of the not being able to get low enough to the action we wanted, hence I needed to readjust the range of the tremolo. But the principle is still the same. You set up where you want your block to be standing. I wanted it parallel first, but then we ended up with it the locking nuts, bolts, screws, locking screws. We ended up with the locking screws, instead of being parallel, tipping back, because I knew that it gave me a lower action here and I didn't need all of the up bend. And we ended up with a standard Strat range of up pitch increase, pitch bend upwards. So that saved me having to go in under there and put a shim in, which I had mentioned to Mark earlier on. But the principle was fairly straightforward. We stretch out the strings thoroughly with all the locking nuts at this end loose. We set up the position we want and hold it in place. Now I had to do it a little bit differently this time, because previously I did it with the wedge under the back here, because it was perfectly set to hold the screws parallel to the top. But now we needed it to stay in this position. I couldn't use that wedge in the same place, so I had to wedge it the other side of the block in the back, which did the same thing. I was able to then tune it up with the block in the right position. Once I'd stretched the strings, tuned it up with the block in the right position, and knew I had the right action, then I was able to lock this off. But of course, if you remember, I'd put in the claw all the way in first. And then once I locked it off, I was able to, before I locked it off, I was able to remove the block. It went back because the springs overpowered it, but I was then able to use the screwdriver to release this, the tension on the springs, which allowed this to come back up to that ideal position, which again is slightly pointing backwards, but it's the position we wanted it. So it came back up there until we reached the note was E. In the instructions they often say let it come back up until it's in the position, and they mean horizontal because you've started out aiming for horizontal. We couldn't do that. We had to start with a tilt back already. So the best way, and anyway, even if it's horizontal, still the best way to find it is if you've tuned it all up, you take the your little piece of wood out, the springs overpower it, you readjust the tremolo screws and it comes back up. And the easiest way to do it is keep going until it's back to E, because you had it set up at E before you released or pulled the little piece of wood out. So it's actually really simple, very simple to do, and it just looks complicated. This case tonight was more complicated because we had I guess it's what you might call a design limitation, in that often I don't even think these guitars are meant to play this low, because we should really, ideally, I would like to have this with the screws, the locking screws horizontal, or parallel, sorry, with the top, and be at the 1.2 to 1.5 millimeters here, without having to either shim that or start with this lower back, which gives me a lower action. But that, you know, who knows, we get there. Now I know that we're at the target action, so I'm going to play it to just hear what I get to think about that. I think we will level to get rid of that slap, and I also will then check out all the bends here to make sure we've got no choking. I think we'll be all right on that front. So it's going to be leveling for almost one single-minded thing in mind, which will be to get rid of fret slap. Now, interestingly, my little extra piece of wedge kind of came apart, so it was just stuck on with some sort of resin originally, but that's okay. Still got a decent sized wedge around. Okay, that's it for tonight. We will come back tomorrow and do this kind of second part. Well, it might look like a big job tomorrow if I go in and do the fret leveling as well, but we kind of know where we are in the basic setup already. So see you then. I have but one camera today, so I have to get it right. So here we are, back on the Ibanez. It's the next day. Off camera, what I've done is I have masked off the fingerboard. Done it first because it's such a nice clean one. I don't want to get it dirty at all. So I've masked it off, but of course to do that I had to take the strings off, and to take the strings off I had to then put them back on and get them back to balance. Interestingly, I did a bit of online research, and I found only one document about this particular tremolo. And a couple of interesting points is there are, I don't know if you can see there, yikes, there are two little bushes, nylon bushes, that you're supposed to replace to regain, what's that word, friction. So we could swap those out because there is a spare set. There's some reference to some sort of tightening grub screw in there that I can't see, but it's not, if it is in there, it isn't putting up any fight. I did, thanks to some comments online as well, I did find the level marker down in there, that little horizontal marker, but it doesn't really change the setup here, and that is in order to get the action we want here without shimming the neck, we have to set this a little bit off the horizontal, and that's just how it goes. There's no way around it. It's not, yeah, there's nothing we can do about it. It's a factor of the basic geometry, and it's one of those things that because it's basic geometry, if we wanted to go lower and we wanted this to be horizontal or parallel, we would either have to, as they suggest, take the bridge down, which we can't because there's no more room, or we have to shim the neck, or we have to leave the neck but tilt the thing back to take advantage of the lowering of the action that comes with tilting it back. And as far as I'm concerned, we've got plenty of backwards movement to make the thing play nicely. So with that all in mind, I'm going to begin the leveling process. to do that I'm going to have to undo these little fellas. Now I only wanted these, I lost the thing, I only wanted these on in order to tune up and get the tremolo floating in the right place. So what I'll do is I'll take them off altogether. Put them in a little row over here, one, and then we're left pretty much under correct tension still, which is fine. Okay, now that means obviously I can now, with a bit of grabbing, I can lift out the bits I want to move, the strings I want to move out of the way. Okay, so the aim of this fret leveling process now is to, we know all the notes play. I played it today for about an hour-ish, yeah, about an hour. We know all the notes play, and we know there's no bends on chokes either, so I'm expecting almost no need for any leveling on the treble side or from the G outwards, because it all feels pretty good. What I am expecting though, or needing to deal with, is a little bit of what I call fret slap, which is over on the wound string side of things. So a quick look at this shows me actually something I kind of expected, which is, although some people online have reported, or some people on my Facebook channel, whatever, you know, thread page, have made some comments about how this Genesis series of thingies, they made note that their frets, on the one he had, the frets were really poor, but I didn't expect that. I expected them all to be good, and actually under load it confirms what I expect. They're all cutting pretty much equally, and that's a sign of an incredibly good neck that is bending in a uniform way. Now I kind of knew that already because of the way that the notes play independently or individually, and how the bends seem to work. Fine, I'm perfectly happy with that. So I'm going to do a similar amount to the next track of frets, or the B track as I call it. And again, I'm not really expecting anything other than the result I just had. It's going to be the test of whether, or how much leveling we have to do. It really comes down to the what I call the fret slap, and that is a slightly different situation from leveling in order to address single, potentially high or low frets. Fret slap is, my experience seems to show, the combination of, so that's interesting now. So I'm finding a low, there's a couple of low frets here that are turning out now, which may have to do with the fret slap on this neck. But anyway, it's still reasonably mild, and you probably note when I play them, they won't have any direct effect on the played notes, because the effect of their lowness is below the action I've got set. Fine. Yeah, so we're going to now recalibrate as we move across into what I call the G track. Typically the G track is where I have to keep an eye out for, it's where you tend to choke out as you're bending strings or bending the high E string. So the important bit about the G track is normally at this stage, if you've got any chokes on bending, it's on the G track now that we would be expecting to hear them iron out as we level any even slightly high frets. Now what I'm probably expecting to see is a good cut all over the neck, but I'm sort of expecting probably the low ones to continue to be low across here. Now I'll just sort of keep my eye on that as we go. Yeah, those two still low, so 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16 still low. But again, I'm just keeping an eye on them. They're not so low that they're affecting the playability or even the bends of the high E or the playability of the G string. So still good, we're all good. It's the lower strings, the A and the E, we're going to have to pay very close attention to. So it's here we'd expect, if the lowness, no, there's no discernible problem there. This is good. Now we go to the D track and so on. Now I think the thing to do, just to quickly do, is check the amount of slap there is on the D. Practically none. A tiny bit here, and mostly on the E. So that's going to be the challenge. So let's get the D ready to go. So it's sort of a cursory leveling I'm doing here, probably until we get to the E. Well, we want to try and alleviate that little bit of fret slap as we get down to the low E string. Now the fret slap in this case is caused by a combination of very low action, very flat neck, bigger, thicker string spinning more, creating more movement in the center of the neck, and so it's clipping the frets as it spins at some point. And what's good about the leveling process is that if you can level out the slap, what it does is it creates just a little bit more space for the string to spin, and it allows you to alleviate that, what I call slap, that little buzz that accompanies all fretted notes. And if you can alleviate that, then you don't have to lower the action or dial in a bit anymore. Now I'm getting some high frets just around the 12th now in comparison to everything else, and still low on the, whatever I said it was, 13, 14, 15, 15, 16. So a little high on the 12th, a little low on the 15, 16. But I think this will play fine. It's just telling me what's going on. Only a little bit higher on that 11th and 12th. That's pretty good. I'm not going to worry about anything there. Now we calibrate for the A track. I had a really, you know, sometimes, well, I'm sure you know, sometimes you watch TV and you're relaxing, or not TV, YouTube, sorry. I never watch TV anymore. So I'm watching YouTube, and I came across some Elvis footage, some footage of Elvis rehearsing with his band in about 1973, I think it was. And you know, he's not long out of his Black Leather '69 comeback tour or whatever it was stage, and he's in Las Vegas still, I think. But I don't know exactly what the era was or the residency was. I'm sure it said, but I've forgotten. Anyway, but he's playing with a band that has, they've all got sideburns, I think, but he's got a guitarist who's playing a pink Paisley Telecaster, another guitarist who's playing like a Gibson Midtown or 335 type of guitar. Midtown, but it's a slightly smaller one, maybe. And then there's a acoustic guitar player, a sort of older guy than Elvis, I think, and a singer, bass player, and a drummer, a very, very good drummer as well. Anyway, he's playing with these guys, and it's just fantastic to watch him watch them rehearsing. Okay, we're on for the final one. Yeah, so watching him rehearse is just electric. I mean, the guy was fantastic. I know he was a flawed human being, and I know he came to a sad end and all the rest of it, and he wasn't perhaps geared for his success and all the things that didn't go right for him and stuff. But what a talent! I mean, what an absolute, like the Amy Whitehouses is. What an absolutely fantastic talent. And to see him rehearsing, if I should I ever be able to get anything close to that sort of togetherness they've got in this residency band where it's at the such and such casino somewhere, wherever it is. But it's just fantastic. I mean, absolutely incredible. But if you ever get a chance, I don't know, it's sort of, I think it's kind of unedited rehearsal footage type of thing, Elvis. And the guitar player is great. He's got this, well, they all are, but the Telecaster player has this paisley, pink paisley style Telecaster. No, don't worry about that. Still some more to go. Yeah, and he plays a lot of country style, Memphis inspired type licks, kind of sort of bluesy, well, country file, Mississippi bluesy country sound. Absolutely fabulous. And him and Elvis are always constantly smiling between each other. There's like some kind of unspoken, fun little unspoken thing going on, which is great to see. But it's like that with most of the players. But if you get a chance to watch it, I'd never seen it before, and I quite like to watch, Elvis things. So it's been, someone's hidden it somewhere, so I'm very pleased to have found it, and it was wonderful to watch. Now I am going to just do a little bit more leveling, and what I'm going to pay attention to now is I'm trying to do repetition rather than any downward pressure. I want this shape of this truss rod to kind of work itself onto these frets, and my feeling now is that I don't want to take any more material. The frets are pretty good, in fact very good generally, so I'm going to accept that if I wonder if I can tune this up easily enough here. Let's see if I can get an E. Probably not a good idea. So here's the choice. I'm going to check very close. Like I say, I don't really want to raise it, and I'm trying not to add any more curvature into the neck, which would help a little bit here. It's very, very flat, but I'm pushing it. I think I'm going to leave it like that. All right, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take off all the strings. Now this always gets to be quite fun, so I'm going to block it so it doesn't put too much pressure on the last string I undo. See which is the best way to do that. It's going to pull that way, isn't it? Clang, it's going to go down. So it doesn't really like shutting down on, or it doesn't like putting bits of wood under here. It gets a bit temperamental. Right, but let's do it thusly anyway. So we're in the situation now where we're probably going to need to do a little bit of truss rod adjustment anyway, because we're going to switch out to different strings. So we're going down a gauge, so it'll probably be too flat, so we will have to make a small adjustment, but we'll do that when we've got the new strings on. Now also the this is trying to pull itself off the thing here. It's difficult to do it without it coming apart, which it's just now done. Stay there. Yeah, so we're going to, that will require doing kind of setting it up almost from the beginning again. So we'll go back to the target action. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my thing. Let's put you down here. Sorry about the one camera thing. No changes. Easier editing for me for this section. So what I'm going to do now is, if I can, put this flat on the deck, strings out the way. Let's just undo these. So this is freeing up the strings so that they will release. But they had a name on here. I've been referring to them by different things all throughout the day. Now I'm just going to slightly tighten them back up again, because what I don't want to lose is the little block, and it tends to go wandering star. Lee Marvin. I couldn't have found myself noticing noticing the other day that Lee Marvin is featured on the front of Band on the Run, Paul McCartney's Wings album. It seems such a strange thing. But then so is Peter Sellers, no. Peter Cushing, no. Christopher Lee, yes. John Conte, the athlete, and a few other people. Strange. Right, so we're at a different angle. Should we stay here for a minute? Let's go here. Yeah, Lee Marvin. I was born under a wandering star. What a strange record that was. I was born. Right, so now we're going to remark these. I'm going to thingy them, recrown them. So very little work to be done, mainly a little bit on the A&E side of things. Yes, so I mean, I kind of recognise Band on the Run, the album cover, but it never occurred to me to try to figure out why these various people. I know they had a whole thing on Sgt. Pepper where they had all the different kind of characters, which was interesting too. But why there were all of those, I don't know. So, as I said, I sort of expect to have quite little to do here. I can see where it's put any flat spot on the frets, and you can sort of tell it can when you're at this stage. This stage tends to confirm what which frets had a bit more unevenness than others, because you end up doing a little bit more work to recrown them. So I've got oops, let's torn that a little bit. I've got another, hopefully, well, looks like it, PRS coming in at the weekend for a refret. And it's interesting that it's a kind of similar situation to Aaron's, which is that, well, Aaron's and, oh my goodness, I'm losing track of, that one, blimey, what was the one I'm thinking of, the Gordon Smith one. Anyway, yeah, so it's another person who's not finding themselves with enough fret width. Actually, that wasn't so much a problem. Oops, yeah, look, I keep chopping holes through the orange thing. This is going to be turned over within a week. It's filthy already because I did some radius block sanding on there yesterday. So it doesn't last long. I think I'm going to have to go for some other kind of surface, try and find one that's cleanable, for goodness sakes, but it's very hard. I mean, even carpet offcuts aren't cleanable really. They just end up being chucked in the bin after a while. Maybe I'll go and see if I can find some thrown away offcuts. There's carpet showroomy thing pretty much right next to Halfords, where I do my cardboard runs in Plymouth. So it might be worth me going and have a look before the rains set in. Cue the song. But I would have liked to... No. I was just a kid. Candle burned out long before the legend ever did. Dee 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 dee. Okay, it's all looking good. Hardly any touching, leveling at this end. And in fact, far less along the E track than I thought. So I've been very conservative and probably stopped earlier than I absolutely had to. But you know, they're all round good frets. I don't want an imbalance of, you know, loads or relatively loads of leveling on one side and hardly any on the other. I really prefer it was all of an ofness. Now what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to remove the locking nut for a moment, because I want good access to sand up here, and I don't want to run the risk of hitting the teeth on the locking nut. So I'll just take this off. It's very nicely fitting screws, I have to say. Very good quality as well. And there it goes, and it comes off with its little shim, little brass shim. And I'll put it down over there in the same direction as it came off, but that should be absolutely fine. What I will do is I'll put a bit of tape over this end just in case, as a sort of protective thing, so I don't have to worry about just running into it with the sandpaper. So I'm now in a position to start the sanding out process, which is again, you know, a bit messy, but it's just tiring and boring. Normally I think I tend to sort of omit this stage, but I think I'll just leave it in because it's easier. So what I do on these days is I start with my highest, roughest grade, which is 400, and I just run across this way on all of the frets a kind of similar amount on each, because obviously it has an abrasive, it's quite abrasive, and I want to sand down any horizontal scratches, but I don't want to change the overall levelness by any unusual degree. So I'm doing them two at a time at the moment, and then I will move into a sort of across the board thing. Yeah, so I think I've got at the moment, I've got now I'm going to do three, by the way. I've got, I think, a PRS refret coming in and set up, all in the same thing. I've probably got a 7 to wide 6 string conversion coming in using a Schecter Demon, is it? Probably. That's the donor guitar, which should be actually quite straightforward to do, relatively straightforward. And then I've got a Gibson Les Paul, probably coming in at the weekend, as mentioned, and then yeah, probably something else interesting. Who knows? Never know that far in advance, which is, I suppose, is scary from the cash flow point of view, but kind of interesting from the see what comes up type of point of view. Okay, so now I'm going to, with the same bit of paper, just to begin with, I tend to like to run down the neck. I'm conscious that it's leaning on the headstock, but that's fine, it's on the sponge and I'm not pressing hard. So part of why I like to do this first run with my fingers is so I can sort of feel the fretboard, and sort of as I'm doing it I'm looking a lot closer at the frets to get a sense of the state they're in and where the scratching is that needs to come off. And then I tend to, whoops, I'm out of view, tend to move over here and run it down this way. So this is the first of the 400 grits, and then I should have put a bit of green across there to keep the dust off there. First of the 400 grits, and then I move to 600, sorry, another 400, two of each. So two 400s, two 600s, two 1000s, two 1500s, and then switching to the micro mesh, which goes 1500 to 1800, 2400, 3200, 3600, 4000, 6000, 8000 and 12,000. Right, so now I'm on to the second of 400s, and I'm switching to the block now. What I'm looking at, that will sort of do. So it's a bit noisy and it's not good conversational space, which isn't why I normally turn the camera off, but it's probably easier to keep going on this one. Oops. So while I'm doing this, I get to sort of run over the edges a bit as well to soften them and make sure that they're as nice and finger friendly as possible. I've been watching a really great podcast recently called London Eats, and there's a guy who does Uber type deliveries. So I think he signs up to various apps, and he has an electric scooter and an electric bike, and he's all cameraed up and, you know, Bluetooth mic and so on and so on, and he's got his phone clipped to his bike, whichever bike it is, and he goes off into, switches on, logs on to these different sites, and they basically present him with pickups from all the different eateries as the orders come live. He gets an option on all the orders, he accepts them, goes, picks them up, delivers them, and just an incredibly simple concept of, you know, content, as in, hey, just follow me around the streets of London as I deliver food. And for some reason I find it really compelling, partly because I used to work in London and live and work kind of out the Waterloo area, Southwark area, and seems to be based in that area and does a lot of his work around there. So it's him riding around very areas that are quite familiar to me. It's sort of nice to see it, even though I don't want to live there for love nor money. And then he edits very well, because his kind of thing just works well with editing. It's not like mine. He's got really good editing skills, great camera work, great pictures, and you just hear and see him sort of making a living, riding around the city, delivering to all the weird and wonderful people in London who seem to like to have their food delivered. And sometimes you get a look in at how brilliantly, smoothly oiled this whole machinery of food ordering and delivery is, and then sometimes you get to see it clogged up and completely inefficient, depending on which certain times of day in certain restaurants and cafes that are maybe not keeping up with things. So it's really just kind of an interesting fly on the wall-y type thing. It's called London Eats, and if you like that sort of thing, go and watch. Of course, he also demos and tries out various electric bike technologies, both scooters and sort of push bikes. That's one I've been watching recently. I'll tell you another one. This is good, boring content. Another one I watch a lot of is one called, what's it called? It's the channel, main channel is called Arroz Marisco, which I think is some sort of food in Portugal or something. But anyway, that's the name of the channel. It's got nothing to do with food. It's a channel of a guy who works in Hong Kong, who seems like every day practically takes his camera gear up the Golden Hill mountain road, wherever it is, above Hong Kong, and films the goings on of the various troops of macaque monkeys, which is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I love monkeys and primates, macaques in particular, and he's the only, well, one of the very few people doing any kind of monkey filming online that isn't abusive. You know, he's not exploiting them. He just spends his time up on the mountainside and sits and gets to know them, recognises who's who, and basically has been documenting their kind of family dynasties for the last 6 years, 7 years maybe, perhaps even more. So if you search for Monkey Hill Hong Kong or Golden Hill Monkeys Hong Kong, his name is, what his channel calls himself, Arroz Marisco, you'll recognise it. But I watch that like a soap opera. Follow the little characters as they're born and grow up into juveniles and young adults, and watching the young adult males having to leave their natal troop and bugger off to another troop, or try to elbow their way into another troop because they can't stay in their natal troop because they won't be able to breed without the gene pool getting mixed up. So nature has this way of sending them off, which is quite a hard process for them, but they have to get out there and make their way as a breeding male. No identification or anything there. Anyway, so that's another thing I watch. I also like to watch 4K airport arrivals. You know, the high quality, high res shots, 4K stuff, like from there's some from Melbourne airport and places like that. I just love watching those big passenger planes, cargo planes taking off and landing. Yeah, lots of weird and wonderful things. The internet's great for that. It's such a weird mixture of stuff that when you add it all up, you think, what kind of person would that make me out to be? You know, some of them that I watch, some people that I listen to or watch, you would think, oh, look out, he's a right winger. And then other things I watch, you would go, oh, look out, he's a woke lefty. So I like the fact that I can cater for what I'm interested in, not what the categories of things assume I'm interested in. You know, I don't make any secret of the fact that I'm not a Trump fan, not for any reason other than I don't respect or like his personality traits and his conduct. I don't really know much about what he claims to care about, or the bits that I do hear him say that he cares about. The bit that would probably confuse you is I tend to agree with a lot of them, if not most of them, but I can't stand him as a person, and I think he's a disaster as a politician. That's just my personal view, which I'm allowed to have, and I don't you don't need to argue with me, because you're not going to convince me and I'm not going to convince you. But the point being is, what I'm trying to get across is, I probably don't like him for reasons that might not seem to add up to you, or might be confusing, because you might judge me as a certain kind of person, and then it would turn out that your assumptions about what I believe in the world would probably be incorrect. And yet, we seem to have we're in a world at the moment that if you say you hate Donald Trump, people assume you're left-leaning, and I wouldn't call myself that. In fact, I'm against an awful lot of leftist stuff. So I'm quite, it's possible, I find it entirely possible to dislike that individual and their conduct, but not also believe that the pandemic was a scam, or the aliens are real and the government's hiding them from us, or all the other things you're supposed to believe alongside I just don't understand this. I know I get it that in Amazon, if people who like this also like that. I totally get that sort of algorithmic thinking, but I never would have believed that we would have got to a place where people were, I guess, lazy enough that it applied to them, that, oh, I can't be bothered to come up with a set of personal opinions on things, so I'll just inherit a whole stack. So if I say I don't like Trump, then it means I'm anti-guns, I'm pro this, I'm anti that. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out that simply. And maybe that makes a harder world for some people to fasten onto, and it's annoyingly complicated when somebody doesn't follow your expectations, if you kind of map a certain type onto people. But I reserve the right not to be an algorithmic character. Just because I like this doesn't mean I therefore think that, is my stand on it. And I hold tight or hold firm on that. Anyway, I don't want a discussion in the comments about, therefore you're an absolute this or you're a that because you the other. If you like something different from me, I am happy for you, and that's where I leave it. No interest at all about arguing with you to persuade you, because the one thing I've learned in growing older is that it's never worth, and nor almost is it ever possible, to argue somebody out of a position of belief, and that's fine. That's maybe how it should be, but I don't bother trying. When I was a kid, I think I was stupid enough to think it was either important to try to do that, or it was even possible. But like a lot of, I suppose, idealistic people, young people, I would get earnestly involved in long arguments or debates about the existence or otherwoods of God or not, and it seemed to matter to try and convince somebody, I suppose, the error of their ways, or at least in a discussion to point out where I think that's still valid. If you're having a genuine discussion to understand the premises that each of you has bases their worldview on, I think it's absolutely valid and fine to sort of go into detail about why you hold a particular view and why you don't hold another one, and so on. But I think I've learned well enough to, if I detect myself getting anywhere near the trying to persuade you out of your belief system, my alarm bells go off and it's time for me to run for the hills. Because, the thing is, this binary sort of argumentative oppositional thinking, where you only talk about belief in religion, for example, or if you talk about belief in religion, it automatically follows that you must argue and or fight about it with, and also find yourself defaulting to a position of trying to convince somebody to change their view. I think that's a complete waste of time. It's so depressing, because when you can talk openly about yours and somebody's views and kind of explore why they hold them and why you hold them, that becomes a really enlightening and exciting thing. You learn something, they learn something if they're willing to listen as well. And what's not to like about that? It's a massively beneficial undertaking, but it's almost never conducted that way anymore. It seems to be that belief is either a means to take offence often, or it's it triggers the need to be right and all those other things that come from that. So it's a real pity, I think, for that to be the case, because it's great fun to be able to explain your stance or your take on things, and to hear someone else's. And of course, the one way that you won't get to hear the detailed ins and outs of somebody else's point of view is to start fighting with them when they begin to tell you their take on things. So what I'm going to do, just moving swiftly along, is I'm going to cut off these strings, and I'm going to take them down the end here and lock them first of all in the thing. I didn't do something. What I didn't do is I didn't check the intonation. I think the intonation is going to be wrong looking by the shape of this. So I'm going to have to assume it's wrong, and I'm going to have to prepare myself to adjust it. And to adjust it, I will have to stay on there. First of all, get it all set up, and then move away to one side. I'll get it all strung up, and then I will, when I've got the action right, I will test the first one, and then I will move everything else after that. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, I think I regret that we've moved into a culture or an era where the internet has got such an amazing ability to talk and share life experiences and views and interests with other people, and yet it's become really, really inflammatory or incendiary to do so. So that I very often, I don't know about you, but just for the sake of a kind of peaceful life, I very often find myself not exactly self-censoring, but I just don't go into any detail normally. If you see something stated and you go, I've got an idea about that, or I'm not sure I agree with that, and I find myself sort of starting to formulate a response, and then I just think, what's going to happen? I'm just going to get screamed at and insulted if I put that out there, and I'm not going to get almost nobody's going to debate it. So yeah, it's a shame to kind of avoid it a bit, especially when I was watching today. It's not exactly anything contentious, but I was watching a live stream today from a guy who I occasionally watch, a guy called Vibe, and he's just a Trinidad guy who does live streams and takes us on little trips around the islands, and goes eating some places and tells us shows us what's around. And I was born and spent a few years in Trinidad, and I feel attached to it, and it's a place I love a lot about the culture of it. But anyway, the beauty is that he was doing a live stream from the Trinidad and Tobago Independence Day celebrations today, and it was absolutely fantastic. Just to be somewhere that I haven't been able to go for a long time, and that I really love, and I keep thinking to myself, oh, I wish he'd just do more of these, and just, it doesn't have to be a big event. You know, I just, there's another Trinidadian blogger, a guy called Videsh, and I think it's cooking with Videsh or something like that, and he does loads of food stuff, and sometimes he'll just kind of record without too much editing hours of a river, you know, cook up by the river, or a beach lime, or, you know, people hanging out together having fun, music in the background, blah blah blah. And to me, I just love that. It's like hanging out at a party in Trinidad on the beach, hearing the language spoken, or the, you know, the accent and the dialect, which I really enjoy hearing, and the music and stuff. And I just think, you know, the beauty of the internet to allow you to do that, and also, if you wanted to, you know, to converse with the people there that you can't speak to, you're not in touch with, because you're thousands of miles away. So it's just such a great thing, and yet, I don't know, do we ever actually get into that sort of, we seem to use the internet to not talk to people. We like to look at things, it's true, we like to, you know, I like to hear and see normal life in other places, but it's like, I don't know, maybe I know it's my stepson, he talks to a small group of people all the time online, and a lot of them haven't met each other in the real world, some of them have, and but they talk via the, you know, the headphone things, and but I don't know if they kind of go out their way to talk to new people from other than around, just focused around the game. That's not such a bad thing, I think. But I noticed that, you know, we don't often use that medium to kind of make new meetings with people, apart from, I don't know, dating sites or something, or Tinder or whatever those things are, Grindr, Tinder, Schminder, but I don't know. I just think there's so many fabulous people who live differently. I suppose in the world where we need to reduce that sort of assumptions about each other more than anything now. You know, we need to get to know others more importantly. I wish somehow we'd use the technology more to do that than to kind of shut ourselves off and consume media. That's just a little bleating appeal of mine. Okay, so where are we now? Now we're in a different place. Now what's going to happen? We need the same action, and we need different relief, probably. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go back to basics, and we're going to dial in the tremolo Armageddon. Tremolo Armageddon. So we start off with it slammed in against the wall. So this is you putting on some new different gauge strings, Mark. Right? We haven't got the locking caps on, it's loose at the moment. I'm going to take this one out for a second if I can get it out, and then I'm going to take this one out if I can get it out. Right, stay on your things. Okay, so we are spring heavy at the moment, it's pulling everything flat. So we know we're going to aim for a particular action. I think to do that we will still need to use this, use our little wedge to get ourselves get it into a certain position, which is a bit of a tilt down, but it's quite difficult to get it to go. I think that will be alright. Let's try that one. Now we should be able to tell once we start tuning these up, we'll have a sense of what the action is here. And we'll go off that this time round. Bum, 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 bum. Now I'm going to need the wire. Whew, it's got dark already. What's happened to the evening? Oh yes, it's half 8 and we're in the winter now. hoping to go kayaking on Saturday. Actually, it could be Sunday now. Anyway, now we're locked off, as you know, it's dust, and we're going to take this slowly. So we're going to just check to get to A. E. Okay, so we are in sort of position pointing downwards a little bit. Now remember what I said before, we have to stretch out the strings. We don't want to do any tremolo stuff from here onwards with slack left in the strings. So you want to do this several times over. If you're working with anything 9s or below, be very careful when squeezing the high E string, because it's a little bit more fragile than the last set, which was the 10 gauge high E. So here we are. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this to a point where I've got everything the way I want it, and then I'm going to tweak the truss rod, and then I'm going to put the little retainer bars back on and that sort of thing. Yeah, so that's another thing you'll find me watching. Somebody doing a kind of street food tour of Port of Spain, but it's for old times' sake, it's nostalgia and to hear the sounds of Trinidad. Which I'm attached to. So that's what I also watch. I watch a couple of sailing channels. One called Wildings Sailing with a young guy called Mark, who's sort of been on a project to rebuild a couple of boats and sail them. His last one was a catamaran, and he sailed that with his wife for a while. They split up, and he's now bought a cheap derelict Warram catamaran, which he's now doing up in Amsterdam. So if you're into sailing, that's definitely a good one. He's a good kid, is Mark. He's bloody hard working as well, frighteningly hard working. Okay, we're fractionally tall there, so I'm going to try and just reset this a widget lower, but the problem is it doesn't really successfully go any lower. Let's see if I can. No. Small bits of wood. No, that's not going to work. No, that's not going to work. Nearly. Try that. It's really that positioning there tells us our target action. That's 1.5. It's still a tad high. It's quite difficult to find any other setting unless you've got the right bit of wood. Okay, we're on 1 point. That's not bad. I'm going to go with that one. But now the tuning will be different. Yeah, Wildings Sailing. Good channel. He's about to get his boat back in the water. Gee, I need D. Yeah, he's running out of time on the hard. Sorry, I need a G. On the hard standing. So he's done structural repairs and done the painting of the holes, so now he's on the way to dropping it back in the water any minute now, and then building the rest of it, the kind of comfortable bit, the living quarters, because the Warram catamarans are really basic. They're like a not flat exactly, they're like a platform on two hulls, or two hulls joined by beams, upon which you build your not living quarters, because they're in the hulls. You build your sort of deck space to your own needs, really, whether it's a tent on board a flat thing or whether it's a fully built cockpity type, raised thing. It's really flexible. So he's not really got anything on top at the moment behind me. So he'll be, as soon as he's in the water, he'll be looking to get on with that. And I watch the Sailing Brothers, two guys from Cardiff. Have gone around the world and are currently, well, somewhere in the Pacific. I think their videos are a few weeks behind, but they're somewhere in the Pacific and they're sailing together, and it's just great. They're great company with each other and everything, just brilliant. Now I'm going to do a last little bit of stretching because I don't want to do any more, so I'm going to do that last little bit more just because I should. Yes, the Sailing Brothers, Luke and Adam, and their little 32 foot something, maybe 36 foot sailing yacht. I think it's Atlas, and they're in the French Polynesia at the moment, or on video. They started out by sailing, I think learning to sail, getting a boat, sailing around Britain, then across the Atlantic, and then made their way to the Panama Canal and off into the Pacific. Okay, so we're in tune now. Remember this? So what we're going to do is we are going to put on these caps, locking caps. Did we do it before we have them? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do the relax first. Sharp. Everything's sharp. Keep the tuner handy. And here we go. Undo the tremolo claw screws until we get that note back to E. Now this is a lower gauge of strings, so pound for pound we might be in a higher start point. Let's have a look. Coming down towards E. Yeah, that's okay. Slightly under. Lovely. So there we are. We're in our right position. Now we can put on the locking caps and dance the blues. On with the locking caps. Lightly first. Middle one. Sorry, middle one. And the base one. Okay. Now, I don't really know if it makes any sense to worry about doing this before or after lockdown here. If I lock them down here, I'm going to put some pressure on the strings now by squeezing these down, but it really only increases the pressure on this side. Let's just check they're both the same. There's no flat spot for the low strings. No, that's okay. Yeah, so I think it'll be fine either way. Okay, so this one goes on there like so. Like I said, this doesn't really fulfill too much of a function with the locking caps on, so I'm not 100% convinced I know why they have them on there at all, given the nature of this guitar and the way it works, because this is holding them. There's no difference in the movement of the string over the nut with this on or off, so I can't see why there's a problem. Caught myself out. Do you know what I've done? Call me idiot. I've forgotten to set the thingies. So right, now what am I going to do? I want to go out, 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 out. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now tune up. Some piece of bridges buzzing. Forgot to do me adjustment. I've got a few things in the wrong order just there, but hey. Now if you get yourself in this position and you think, hang on, this isn't working out again. I've done my fine tuners and everything's going wonky. And you can't get it to stabilize, which you should be able to. Okay, what you should be able to stabilize it. What I'm going to do now is lock these off, and then I'm going to check the relief on the neck. What we also have to do is check the intonation. So we check the tuning first. That's pretty much on. Right, now the important bit is the intonation before we get any further. Right, it's out. So, here we go. We have to sort of go again. This is going to be tricky because the nature of this intonation here is that the intonation screws, bolts, things are right above right under the strings. Okay, so it's also a kind of crude mechanical way of doing things. So let's see if we can get a zoom in. It's all black, so it's not a very good look. So this is too far back. This has to come shorter. Okay, so to do that we have to slack off this string first, which means we have to take off the thingy. In fact, we have to take off all of the locking caps a minute again. Right, now we take this one. If we slack this one, everything else kind of goes all off kilter. So what we have to do is undo this one, which is too wrong size. We undo this one. We know it's too long a distance, and we let it pull forward like it just did then, but it was kind of random. So listen, everything's completely different tuning now. So my guess here would be that we're going to need to do something again. So let's take the time. Hold on. I'm going to go back in to the edge, ram it all the way in, and we will do the intonation on a hard-tailed guitar effectively. That's pulling all the way back, so it'll be very high pitched. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our little thingy there, we're going to go out to there like so, and we're going to treat this as hard-tailed, and we're going to tune it up. And we need that in there. And keep it off there so it doesn't hit the thing. So this is now on E. So we tune the pinged harmonic to E. And there we are. Just make sure we got it right. That's on. Okay, so now what we know is with this thing locked, we know that one's in the right place. Now, we can now slack off the B, and we're going to manually adjust it. So we undo it, and we look at the saddle, and we let it come forward, and there should be a centimetre, that's not the right way to put it, a millimetre between them. Now this one is back a bit too far as well, so we slack this one off. We're still on hardtail, we're going back to the beginning. So we slack this one off, and that's coming forward in a big jump because there's still a bit of tension. So this one, we can use various things to do, but I can use a piece of wood. Right, so I'm going to push this forward with a bit of wood, and I'm going to see. Right, it doesn't want to, I'm blocking it, so that's in the right place. Damnations. Let's push this forward, out of the way, thank you. Okay, so I'm looking for my alignment here. 1 millimetre, 1 millimetre back to here. Lock it down. And this one needs to be slightly forward of the other one. So we'll take the tension off this as well. I think the bottom three actually look okay. Well, and let's tighten them and we'll check them. So we're doing this, I should have said this in the first place, we're doing the, you won't have to do this, but if you do need to do it, do your intonation while it's hard-tailed like this. So we're all open and slack, and we go back to E. Right, we've got all of our things looking good. Again, we'll put it up this way to tune it. Now let's check them again for intonation first. Good. Now, because we've slacked them off momentarily, look at this one. This one's telling me it's a fraction too far back, so I'm slacking it right off again. Just going to do the thingy, let it creep forward a fraction, lock it off again, check it again. Like it, do it up. So each time you happen to slack off the strings like I'm doing here, you do need to sort of stretch them out a little bit. Not massively, but a little bit. Don't know what you can see, sorry. Oh, the view's terrible, I'm so sorry. I've got no other view to look at. Huh? Okay, so I'm just going to give all of these a last pull, and then we'll lock them down, or tune them up and lock them down. And then we'll be back where we should have been. I forgot the intonation bit, and it's a bit fiddly and a bit manual. Now what I have to do is double check, keep forgetting this bit, get all my locking thingies all out, all out, all out, all out, and then we go in 1, 2, 3 now, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now we'll tune it again. Right, locking them off, out of vision, I think. Lock, lock. No, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to do it slightly differently. I don't want a massive difference in pressure between these things, so I'm going to not lock it until I've done this. Twing. Remember? Now I'm going to iron out, undo the thingies until that becomes an E. Very fiddly around the back here. So we just below E, just on E. Right, now we're at pitch. Now I'm going to lock off these tuners. 1, 2, 3. There we are. Now, last little bit now. Zoom out. You see me? Last little bit. Why is that one sharp? Right, I'm going to keep it on its back for a minute, and I'm just going to undo this again. One more time. Let's make sure the things are out of the way. Make sure we've got some done up room here. Thank you. Right. Come along. Keep it going. No, we've run out of room. This isn't. This is not working at the moment. Sorry, I'm going to just take this back to flat one more time. Come on. Right, let's do it flat to the back. Sorry about this. It was working before and now I've not managed to do it. So it's always worth, if you get stuck like this and it's not obeying you and you don't want to spend your life chasing it like that, go back to the hard tail business. We'll tune it up. We know we want about this position here. That will do. And we've got all our things in to the correct amount. Yes, yes, yes. So what you're doing at this point is you're basically tuning up a hard-tailed guitar, pulling a little bit of slack out because we've had a slackening off already. Hoping this isn't slipping down any further, which you might have done the last time. Okay, then we take this off, let it sink in there, and then we should be at G sharp, yep, and then we come out to E. There we are on E. Now what I'm going to do this time, yeah, we're close in tune. I'm going to now lock these off. And that should be it. What we should do now is just there we are. Sorry about that. Fiddle, fiddle. But back to the beginning. If you get lost, it'll work out. If you just trust the simplicity. I could have stayed there balancing it and trying to tune it up until it stabilized. But it's easier, more confidence inspiring actually to go back to the hard-tailed part of it, or hard-tailed setup, and then work away from that like I just did. So we look at the action here and we've got, well, I mean, just about 1.5. Now we've just got to check with a lighter gauge string, that's flat. So I am now finally going to add a teeny weeny bit of counter clockwise to slacken the neck and to allow, where are you, yes, a tiny bit of relief come back into it. Now this is a little bit difficult, as you saw before. I'm sort of struggling to grip it properly with all that stuff there, but I've managed a little turn, and I will check it, get off me moth. Yeah, there we go. Last thing, let's pull up the thing. Let's see if we can find a little extra, those thingies, and they have a particular direction they have to go in, and according to this, it doesn't show it on that one, it shows it on the other side. You have to know which way around they go. Oh boy, how would you tell that? Oh, you're kidding me. How would you know that? How would anybody be able to spot that? Are you for real? Are they even the same? Okay, what's that at this top end? God Lord. This comes out at... can't even make a measurement on it. 5.8. 578. It looks the same all the way, so they are supposed to be conical, and I do not, for the life of me, believe I can see the difference between them. Either that or I'm completely mad. No, you know what? I mean, I can tell. Can I tell that one lives one place and one lives the other? One, no, well, one has a wider gap than the other. I mean, that might be, that might help, but it definitely showed them as sort of cylindrical's wrong. What's the conical? It's not likely conical, but I cannot for the life of me spot that. So I wouldn't know which is which. No, I'm not going to do it. Just because I don't think there's actually a way of knowing, and it isn't too bad as it is. I think that's going to either require more research for another day, or just hold off, because those things do not tell me enough information to allow me to make that choice. I'm afraid I don't. If you're going to bust them or ruin the little bits of nylon, then I'm not going to change them. Sorry. Now this actually, if you push it in at the correct place, which is directly above the centre part, it's fine. So there's a little bit of slop in it, but I even wonder, there's a screw thread in there, I even wonder if it's got to do with that. Does that do up? I suppose I don't have such a device. No, let's just turn it and see what happens. So this way, alright, that does up, that undoes. That's interesting. So there's a bit of tightening there. Pushing in there. Well, that's perfect. So that was just loose. Okay. That's all there is to it. I'm going to show you up close, Mark, so you can see it. Hold on. If you have that little bit of slop, don't rush to change the nylon things. See that screw head slot in there? Just turn that clockwise with a wide enough one of these. In fact, probably a slightly bigger one. Not that big. Hold fire. Is that the smaller one? Yes, slightly smaller. There you are. Yep, done up. That's the secret of everlasting happiness. And then, when you come to put your tremolo arm in, they are very at pains to say press down only on the directly above the bar. Okay, so like so. And it's got no rattle at all. Now what I have done at the beginning is I took down the pickup heights because they were too high. So I'm going to now bring these back up. Now I'm going to go for a standardized 3mm below the lowest held string, which is a sort of standard, but it is entirely to your preference and should be altered to suit your sonic preferences. So the principle being that the closer the poles are to the strings, the greater the output, but the lesser the tonal dynamics. And the alternative to that, or the opposite way around, is the further the strings are from the poles, or the poles are from the strings, the lower the resistance and output, but the greater the tonal range of dynamics, or the dynamic tonal range. Okay, tiny little bit left to do here. The cover for the truss rod. Now, having shown you how to do the truss rod cover, Mark, I know you are now going to be a dab hand at doing it from now on whenever it needs doing, right? Yes. So we'll put these on and we are done, ready to go. And that's us for tonight. The one camera with some pretty lousy camera angles, I must confess. So on this, we've cured the out of tuneness, diagnosed it and cured it. We've lowered the action, precision leveled the frets to take care of as much of the fret slappers as possible. Got quite a bit of it, but we've left it at a very low height, which we could always raise up at the bridge if we wanted to now, but this is very, very flat. Beautiful. I'm very happy with it now. I'm going to take the tremolo out, shove it in there, and we are done for tonight. Thank you very much. I look forward to handing this back to you on, did I say Sunday? Oh, I can't remember now. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whenever it was. And yeah, picking up your Gibson Les Paul in its place. See you soon. Thank you all of you for watching. See you on another one.